Hello. I want to talk to you today about corporate revolution. If you're sitting in a cubicle, all the better. What I mean by corporate revolution has nothing to do with angry, armed people bursting into the lobbies of Fortune 500 companies and demanding access to copy machines. I'm talking about something that's maybe a little more subtle, but I think eventually a lot more profound. There's a few elements to this matter of corporate revolution, and it's already started. And it's going to play out over the next few decades. It's going to become the major story of the next few decades. What's going to happen to the international corporation, the multinational corporation? First of all, we've got this pattern in Western civilization. This pattern of social invention that leads to enormously important institutions, church, state, bank, and then the dispersion of power away from elites and out to people. Martin Luther declared, "We are all priests," and with that wrestled the power of the church from the Pope to the people. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal," and with that wrestled power from the monarchs to the people. None of this, of course, played out instantly. None of it was simple. A lot of twists and turns to this plot. But basically that was the pattern, the rise of new institutions that were dominant, that served a particular need, and then the whole revolution that led to the dispersal of power. Today, the corporation is our dominant institution. And I could cite lots of reasons for this, but I want you to think about your work hours. I want to think about the products you have a choice of, even your entertainment options, what you do with your mind to occupy your thoughts. So much of that's defined by the modern corporation. It's pervasive. It's so utterly defining of the modern world that it's just hard to even conceive of the world without the modern corporation. And furthermore, it's the basis of our wealth. Salaries. Over 90% of American population is an employee, and of that, probably 90% are members of corporations. Wealth. It's been nothing to create wealth like the stock market, which by and large shows what the score is for people who have a part of a corporation. All this to say, the corporation is today's dominant institution, and if the future is anything like our past, it means that the power over these corporations is going to be dispersed outwards from elites out to more and more people. Now, there's a host of reasons this is going to happen, a host of reasons that this will be expedited. One of them is because it's just too complex for central management. Depending on how you measure largest economy, corporations make up from 1/3 to 2/3 of the largest economies in the world, including nation states. These are big, complex, unwieldy beasts. And the power needs to be dispersed outward with the information. And that's happening already. There's another, maybe more subtle kind of thing. In the last century, there was a revolution in banking, in finance. And that went from elites out to the people. And maybe the simplest way that was illustrated was late 1800s, if you wanted even just say a few $100s to borrow for, say, a refrigerator or some newfangled appliance, you'd have to get dressed up, put on your best suit, go down and talk to the banker. And this banker would decide if you're going to get a loan, and if you were, how long you'd have to pay it back. Now, contrast that with today's world where continually bankers, or corporations really, are continually asking you to take out a loan. Credit card solicitations, they come in the mail all the time. And what's happened there is, again, you've got a shift from power in the hands of the elites who can decide whether or not you get credit, whether you have access to investment opportunities, out to the people who now decide whether they want to take credit and whether they want to play in these investment markets. What that has effectively meant is that the modern corporation is owned by lots and lots of people. And as of today, there's no real good mechanism for those people to have control over that. And so the control stayed with the hired hands. It's with the CEOs and the senior executives. That's going to change. Power will be dispersed outwards, not just out to employees, but it'll be dispersed outward to stockholders, people in the community, stakeholders. That's a trend that's going to continue, again, if our future is anything like our past. One of the other things that this has to do with, of course, is these institutions, they're social inventions, but they're not just created whimsically. There's a reason why particular institutions arise to be dominant at a particular time. Henry VIII, Louis XIV, these monarchs who were part genius, part power mongers, they helped create the modern nation state. And it didn't take off just because they had big egos and they knew people. It took off because it served a particular need. When the nation state was emerging, between about 1300 and 1700, what was going on in the economy at that point was that land was becoming the critical resource. Now you can say, well, land was critical before that, and it's true. But it's worth pointing out that before that, we had traditional economies, so the motive wasn't as economic. It was a little more subtle. It was different. Just without going into too much detail, the nation state proved to be a far better mechanism for getting land, regulating land, knocking out trade barriers so that the value of land was enhanced, was far better at all that than the church. And it's really no wonder that the nation state arose as the dominant institution, taking the place of the medieval church. Later, it was the bank, it was financial markets that began to dictate even to the nation states, which needed the money from financiers like the Rothschilds and in order to wage war, in order to conduct the affairs of state. And all of a sudden, things like international bond markets emerged in time to fund things like the Napoleonic War, and then later to help fund new inventions like the railroad, and then the Industrial Revolution to follow. And more recently, it's been the corporation. And the reason the corporation has become the dominant institution is because land and capital have not been as big a determinant of the creation of new wealth, of getting new power, as the knowledge worker. So we go from land, natural resources, to capital, to knowledge workers. And the corporation's a fantastic vehicle for that. The bureaucracy, the management structure, the pooling together different kinds of specialists into one outcome, all that the corporation is literally designed for. And again, no wonder that the corporation would emerge to be the dominant institution of our time. But one of the things that's just beginning to happen, and more we're going to see this, and it's become more and more apparent, we moved from agricultural economy where land was a basis of wealth, to an industrial economy where capital was a basis of wealth, to an information economy where knowledge workers were the basis of wealth. And those three economies have brought with them just a whole sea of sweeping changes. It's been transformative at every level. And now we're moving beyond agricultural, industrial, and information economies to an entrepreneurial economy. And what this means is that we're going to take as a given these first three and increasingly need to create and synthesize something out of those three to create some new value. And this is going to be done in and through the modern corporation. What you're going to see is a CEO becoming less and less of what you might think of as like a modern monarch, one of the few people who has absolute power within their domain. And more, the CEO will look like a venture capitalist. And employees, not even a majority of the employees, but a growing minority, a growing elite, if you will, are going to take on the role of venture capitalists within the corporation, creating wealth, getting some trade-off between security and income for risk and return. They're going to change their role, and they're going to have far more autonomy in that role. And this is exciting. There's so many reasons it's exciting. One of the reasons is we're actually moving into an era where we're going to see the popularization of entrepreneurship. And as the corporation changes, all of society will change. We're going to see this in government. We're going to see it in education. We're going to see more and more social invention or entrepreneurship, where people are creating the soft technology that enables people to realize their potential. Entrepreneurship, especially in the domain of creating whole new institutions, has always been kind of an exception. It's this exogenous force that comes in from outside unpredictably and disrupts markets, the gales of creative destruction, as Schumpeter would call it. But in the future, it's going to become more and more the norm. And today we expect product innovations all the time, new product releases. Technology, it might be every few months. Cars, it might be every year or 3 years, new models. That's just normal. That's life. What isn't normal is a transformation of, say, government agencies, how we elect people, even how we teach people, how they learn. That's going to happen more and more. And what we're going to see is a greater customization of the social world to the individual. We're going to see more and more ability of individuals to realize their potential, not because they're having to adapt to given institutions, but because those institutions are going to adapt to them. It's going to be enormously liberating, enormously creative, and enormously fun. And it's the fourth revolution to bring us the fourth economy. Beyond agricultural, industrial, and information into the entrepreneurial economy. And the crux of that whole transformation is going to occur inside the corporation. Maybe in cubicles right next to you. It's going to be exciting. I plan to share more thoughts about this. Wanted to get the word out just in case you're wondering what was going on down the hall. Might just be the start of a revolution.